The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand arena of the Galactic Academy. Commander Thalvex stood at the center of the massive stone platform, his forearms crossed behind his back. His silver scales caught the light as he surveyed the 20 young warriors assembled before him. These were not ordinary students. They were the best of the best, chosen from hundreds of worlds across known space. Today, you will make the most important choice of your training, Commander Thalvex announced, his voice carrying across the arena without need for amplification. You will choose your master trainer. This person will shape you into warriors worthy of the Academy's name. 20 pairs of eyes watched him with varying expressions. Some showed excitement. Others displayed the calm focus of natural predators. Each cub represented their species' finest qualities. Yenwu stood near the front, his massive frame covered in crystalline armor that grew naturally from his skin. As a Krathian, he was built like a living fortress. His people were known across the galaxy as unbreakable defenders. Next to him, Minji shifted her weight between her four legs, her Selkari body designed for speed and grace. Her people could run faster than most species could drive their vehicles. Behind them, Dohyun closed his three eyes in meditation. The Netheri were telepaths, capable of reading thoughts and projecting images directly into minds. His thin, pale form seemed fragile compared to the others, but everyone knew his mental powers made him dangerous in ways physical strength could never match. 17 other cubs filled the arena, each unique, each deadly in their own way. Your choices await. Commander Thalvex gestured to the far end of the arena. 10 figures stepped forward from the shadows. These were the legendary trainers, masters of combat from across the galaxy. The first was Master Krell, a Vraxian warrior who had won 300 consecutive duels. His red skin seemed to glow with barely contained energy. Next came Teacher Silith, a Quellan who could manipulate gravity itself, making opponents feel as heavy as mountains or as light as dust. One by one, the masters were introduced. Each had achievements that seemed impossible. Each commanded respect that bordered on fear. The demonstrations began. Master Krell moved so fast he appeared in 3 places at once, his blade cutting through solid steel targets as if they were paper. Teacher Silith raised her hand and 50 training dummies floated into the air, then crushed into balls of compressed matter, no bigger than marbles. Master Thorn, a hulking Gorath, punched the ground and created a crack that ran the length of the arena. The cubs watched with wide eyes. These masters represented the peak of what each species could achieve. Choosing one meant gaining access to secrets and techniques refined over generations. But Commander Thalvex held up a hand. There is one more. From the far entrance, a figure walked across the arena floor. The cubs leaned forward, expecting another display of overwhelming power. Instead, they saw something that confused them. A human. The being was small compared to most of them. No natural armor. No extra limbs. No visible weapons or enhancements. The human wore simple training clothes, a gray shirt and black pants. Nothing special. Nothing impressive. This is Jiwan, Commander Thalvex said simply. Jiwan walked to the center and looked at the assembled cubs. There was no bow, no formal greeting, no demonstration of power. The human simply stood there, hands in pockets, and smiled. I know what you're thinking, Jiwan said in a clear, calm voice. You're wondering what a human can possibly teach you. Your species are stronger, faster, tougher. Some of you can read minds. Some of you can bend reality. What can I offer? The arena was silent. Let me show you, Jiwan said. Who here thinks they can catch me? Before anyone could respond, Jiwan started running. Not sprinting, not using any visible enhancement technology. Just running at a steady pace around the arena's outer ring. The cubs looked at each other in confusion. Minsu, the Vraxian prince, laughed. This is the test. We can all run faster than that. Then catch me, Jiwan called back, not even breathing hard. Minsu shot forward like a bolt of lightning. His species could move at incredible speeds in short bursts. He closed the distance in seconds, reaching out to tag the human. But Jiwan shifted slightly, changing direction, and Minsu overshot. The Vraxian tried to stop, but his momentum carried him tumbling across the arena floor. Next? Jiwan asked, still running. Minji accepted the challenge. With her 4 legs, she was naturally faster than almost any bipedal creature. She chased Jiwan around the arena, getting closer and closer. But every time she was about to catch the human, Ji-won would turn sharply or speed up just a bit or slow down unexpectedly. Minji found herself constantly adjusting, and after 10 minutes of this, her legs began to burn with exhaustion. Do-hyun tried using his telepathy to predict where Ji-won would move next. But the human's mind was strange. Not blocked, but chaotic, thinking of 100 things at once. Music, lyrics, mathematical equations, memories of food, all while running. It was impossible to find the thread of intention among all that noise. One by one, cubs tried to catch the human. One by one, they failed. An hour passed. Then 2, then 3, Ji-won never stopped. Never slowed down for long. The human drank water from a bottle while running. Ate some kind of energy bar, even tied a shoe without breaking stride. Meanwhile, the cubs who had tried to give chase were sprawled around the arena, gasping for breath. The other master trainers watched with various expressions of surprise and respect. They understood what the cubs were slowly beginning to realize. The sun moved across the sky. Afternoon became evening. Evening became night. Still, Ji-won ran. The arena's lights came on automatically, casting everything in a pale glow. Some of the cubs fell asleep watching. Others meditated or spoke quietly among themselves. But all of them kept one eye on the human who continued that endless circuit around the arena. Commander Thalvex brought food and water for the cubs, but said nothing. This was their lesson to learn. Dawn broke. 20 hours had passed since Ji-won started running. The human showed no signs of stopping. There was sweat, yes, and the breathing was heavier than at the start. But Ji-won's pace remained steady, step after step after step, never ending. Hyun-woo, the massive Krathian, stood up slowly. His crystalline armor caught the morning light. "I understand now," he said quietly. Minji rose on shaky legs, her 4 limbs still sore from hours before. "Strength isn't just power." Do-hyun opened his 3 eyes and nodded. "It's the will to continue when every reason says to stop." One by one, the 20 cubs stood. They formed a line in front of Commander Thalvex, who had been waiting patiently all night. "Have you made your choices?" the commander asked. "Yes," Hyun-woo said, and his voice carried the weight of certainty. "I choose the human." "I choose the human," Minji said. "I choose the human," Do-hyun echoed. Down the line it went. 20 voices, 20 different species, 20 separate decisions that were all the same. Every single cub chose Ji-won. The other master trainers looked surprised. Some seemed offended. But Ji-won simply stopped running for the first time in 20 hours, walked over to the cubs and smiled. "Good," the human said. "Tomorrow morning we start training. Be ready to run." And in that moment, watching this strange, weak-looking creature who had just run for an entire day and night without stopping, the cubs realized they had chosen wisely. They didn't yet understand everything about humans, but they understood this. Whatever made it possible for Ji-won to keep going when anyone else would have quit was something worth learning. The galaxy would soon learn the same lesson. The next morning came too early for most of the cubs. They assembled at the training grounds as the first light touched the horizon, their bodies still tired from the previous day's excitement. Ji-won was already there, stretching in ways that looked uncomfortable but somehow natural for the human body. "Good morning," Ji-won said cheerfully. "We're going to start with a warm-up." The cubs expected something simple, perhaps a few exercises to prepare their bodies. What they got was very different. "We're going to run for 2 hours, Ji-won announced. Hyun-woo's crystalline armor seemed to dim with disappointment. "Just running? No combat training? No technique work?" "Running is combat training," Ji-won replied. "You'll understand soon enough. Let's go." The humans set off at that same steady pace from yesterday. The cubs followed, confident this would be easy. After all, they were warriors. Running was basic. 30 minutes later, several cubs were struggling. Their species had evolved for short bursts of extreme activity, not sustained effort. Minsu, the Vraxian prince, was particularly frustrated. His people were sprinters, ambush predators who struck fast and hard. This endless jogging felt wrong to his instincts. "Why are we doing this?" he gasped. Ji-won glanced back. "Because your enemies won't always be convenient enough to fight you on your terms. What happens when a battle lasts hours? What happens when you need to chase someone who won't stand still?" The cubs had no answer. By the end of the 2 hours, they were exhausted. Ji-won looked barely winded. The next day was the same, and the day after, and the day after that. Run in the morning, then exercises that built endurance, climbing walls repeatedly, carrying weights for distance, swimming in the academy's deep pools. Everything focused on lasting longer, not hitting harder. News of this strange training spread through the academy. Other trainers and their students would stop to watch, shaking their heads in disbelief. The legendary combat cubs trained by a human who taught them nothing but running? It became a joke. Ji-Wan's runners, they called them mockingly. Min-Su heard the whispers. He heard the laughter. And on the 10th day of training, he snapped, "Enough!" The Vraxian prince shouted, stopping in the middle of their morning run. "I didn't come to the most famous combat academy in the galaxy to learn how to jog. I came to learn how to fight." The other cubs stopped too, looking between Min-Su and Ji-Wan. Some nodded in agreement. Others stayed silent, but their body language showed they shared his frustration. Ji-Wan walked back to face Min-Su. The human was so much smaller than the Vraxian, who stood twice as tall and 4 times as heavy. "You want to fight?" "Yes." "All right," Ji-Wan said calmly. "Let's fight, but we do it my way." "Fine. What are your terms?" Ji-Wan smiled. "We fight until one of us can't continue. No time limit, no breaks, no rules except we keep going." Min-Su's red skin seemed to glow brighter with excitement. "Finally, yes." The other cubs formed a circle. Word spread quickly, and soon other students and even some trainers gathered to watch. The Vraxian prince versus the human trainer. Everyone knew how this would end. The fight began. Min-Su moved like lightning, his fist aimed at Ji-Wan's head. The human ducked, rolled to the side, and came up ready. Min-Su struck again, faster this time. Ji-Wan blocked, absorbed the impact, and backed away. The Vraxian's third punch caught Ji-Wan in the shoulder, sending the human stumbling. The crowd murmured. This would be over quickly, but Ji-Wan got up and kept fighting. Min-Su was stronger. Min-Su was faster. Every exchange went in his favor. The human took more hits than he landed, but Ji-Wan never stopped moving, never stopped defending, never stopped throwing weak counters that bothered more than hurt. 15 minutes passed. Min-Su was breathing harder now. His species burned energy quickly when fighting at full intensity. But he was still winning, still dominating. 30 minutes. Min-Su's movements were slower. The constant activity was draining his reserves. But surely the human must be close to done too. Ji-Wan's face was bruised. There was blood from a split lip. But the human's movements remained steady. Not fast, not powerful, but constant. Always moving, always ready. An hour passed. Min-Su's attacks came in bursts now. He would gather his strength, explode forward with a combination of strikes, then back off to breathe. Ji-Wan weathered each storm, defended, and kept pressing forward during the gaps. 2 hours. The Vraxian prince was staggering. His species simply wasn't built for this. Every cell in his body screamed for rest. The human in front of him looked tired too, but somehow still functional, still dangerous in a way Min-Su was beginning to understand. "We can stop," Ji-Wan offered. "No shame in it." "Never," Min-Su gasped. His pride wouldn't allow it. 3 hours. Min-Su threw a punch that would have knocked down a wall when fresh. Now it barely had any force. Ji-Wan caught his arm, twisted and pushed. The Vraxian fell to one knee. "It's over," Ji-Wan said quietly. Min-Su tried to stand. His legs wouldn't obey. His body had nothing left to give. He looked up at the human who stood above him, battered but unbowed, and finally understood. "How?" Min-Su whispered. Ji-Wan helped him sit down properly. "Your species evolved to be apex predators, fast, strong, deadly. My species evolved to be persistent hunters. We're not the fastest or strongest, but we can keep going when everything else stops. We ran our prey to death on Earth. We just kept following until they couldn't run anymore." The crowd had grown silent. This wasn't the quick victory they expected. They had just watched a human outlast a Vraxian prince through sheer endurance. Minji stepped forward, her 4 legs moving slowly. I think I understand now. You're teaching us to be human. No, Jiwon corrected. I'm teaching you to survive. Strength is good, speed is good, but neither matters if you quit. Humans learned a long time ago that the one who keeps going usually wins. Over the following weeks, the training changed. The cubs still ran every morning, but now they understood why. Jiwon began teaching other skills: how to fight when exhausted, how to use the environment as a weapon, how to think clearly when your body wanted to shut down. Sora, a small Quellan, with large eyes and natural scientific curiosity, spent her evenings researching human history. What she found amazed her. Humans ran after animals for days, she told the other cubs one night. Not chasing, just following. The animal would run away fast, but then had to stop to rest. The human would catch up, and the animal would run again. This happened over and over until the animal's body gave out. The human didn't need to be faster, just more stubborn. That explains so much, Yunwoo rumbled. His crystalline armor had begun to change, becoming slightly less heavy, better adapted for movement. His body was adjusting to the new demands. Do-hyun added, I tried reading Jiwon's mind during training today. It was strange. The human was in pain, I could feel it. But there was this layer of thought above the pain that said, keep going, over and over. Like a wall between what the body felt and what the mind decided. Mind over matter, Jiwon had called it when Do-hyun asked about it. The body will quit long before it actually needs to. It's lying to protect itself. We teach our minds to recognize the lies. The cubs began to change in other ways too. They laughed more, especially at Jiwon's terrible jokes. The human had an endless supply of puns and wordplay that made no sense in galactic standard, but somehow translated into groans and smiles. They learned human concepts like second wind, the strange phenomenon where you feel exhausted, push through it, and suddenly feel energized again. They learned about the wall, the point where your body insists you must stop, and how to climb over it through pure willpower. Other training groups still mocked them, but the cubs no longer cared. They could see their own progress. They could run for hours without stopping now. They could fight when tired. They could think clearly in situations that would have overwhelmed them weeks ago. And they learned something else. Humans were terrifying when you really thought about it. A species that evolved to win by never stopping, by outlasting everything else on their planet, by being too stubborn to accept defeat. What kind of predator was that? Minsu understood it best. After his fight with Jiwon, he had become the human's most dedicated student. We evolved to kill quickly, he told the others. Humans evolved to kill slowly. We're dangerous for minutes. They're dangerous forever. As their first month of training ended, the cubs looked different. Leaner, harder, more confident. They moved with economy of motion, wasting no energy. When they sparred with students from other groups, the difference was obvious. The other students were more skilled, more powerful. But when fights lasted longer than a few minutes, Jiwon's cubs started winning. They were learning to fight like humans, and that made them dangerous in ways the galaxy hadn't seen before. The announcement came during morning assembly. Commander Thalvik stood before all the training groups, his forearms spread wide. The trials of ascension will begin in 1 week, he declared. These trials will test everything you have learned. They will push you beyond your limits. Many of you will fail. Those who succeed will be recognized as warriors worthy of representing your worlds. Excited whispers filled the assembly hall. The trials were legendary, a month-long series of challenges that tested combat skills, strategy, endurance, and mental strength. Only about half of those who started typically finished. The other training groups looked confident. Their masters had prepared them with advanced techniques and powerful abilities. Master Krell's students could move faster than the eye could follow. Teacher Silith's group could manipulate gravity to crush opponents. Master Thorn's warriors could punch through solid steel. People looked at Jiwon's cubs and saw runners. Just runners. We're going to be destroyed, Minji whispered to Hyunwoo. The big Krathian shook his head. Have faith. Jiwon hasn't steered us wrong yet. That evening, Jiwon gathered the 20 cubs in their training area. I know what you're thinking. You're worried the other groups have better skills, flashier abilities. You're right, they do. The cubs looked at each other nervously. But they don't have what you have, Jiwan continued. They haven't learned what it means to keep going when everything says stop. Trust your training. Trust each other. Trust that sometimes the steady one beats the fast one. The first trial was announced. The Shifting Maze. A massive underground complex that changed its layout based on each person's species' strengths and weaknesses. It was designed to nullify advantages and force everyone to adapt. Master Krell's team entered first, moving with their characteristic speed. They shot through the initial corridors like lightning. The watching crowd on the surface monitors cheered at their impressive pace, but then the maze adapted. The corridors became circular, so running fast just meant going in circles. The walls began to shift every few seconds faster than anyone could memorize. Krell's speedsters got disoriented, confused, lost. They finished, but took much longer than expected and looked exhausted. Teacher Sylith's team tried using gravity manipulation to fly over walls. The maze responded by making everything upside down from their perspective, then spinning the entire section. They got sick and disoriented. Half the team couldn't continue. Group after group entered. Each had their advantages stripped away. Each struggled more than they expected. Then Jiwan's cubs entered. They didn't rush. Hyunwoo led the way, testing each corridor carefully. When walls shifted, they marked their path with small scratches. When the maze tried to confuse them, they stayed together and kept calm. Minsu used his Vraxian strength not for power, but to lift smaller cubs over obstacles they couldn't otherwise pass. It was slow. They finished in the middle of the pack, but they looked fresh, energized even, while other teams were collapsing from exhaustion. They saved their energy, Sora observed, watching the screens. The maze couldn't tire them out because they never fought it. They just adapted. The second trial was individual combat duels. Each cub had to face a veteran warrior from the Academy's guard force. These weren't students, they were professionals with years of experience. Hyejin was a lithe Sirathi, one of the smaller cubs. Her opponent was a massive Goroth warrior, twice her height and 4 times her weight. The betting pools gave her no chance. The fight began. The Goroth came forward like a landslide, each punch capable of breaking bones. Hyejin didn't try to block. She dodged, ducked, rolled away. The warrior grew frustrated and pressed harder. Hyejin kept moving, never letting him land a solid hit. 30 minutes passed. The Goroth's breathing was heavy. His species was built for overwhelming force, not extended fights. Hyejin looked tired too, but her movements stayed precise. She had learned from Ji-Wan. Control your breathing, manage your energy, wait for the opening. An hour passed. The Goroth's arms were dropping. Each swing took visible effort. Hyejin saw her chance. She darted inside his guard and struck pressure points that Ji-Wan had taught them, places where even slight pressure could paralyze muscles temporarily. The warrior's left arm went numb, then his right. He couldn't lift his arms to defend anymore. The referee stopped the fight. Hyejin had won by outlasting her opponent. Similar scenes played out across the individual trials. Cubs who should have lost based on raw power won through endurance and patience. They didn't fight to dominate. They fought to last longer than their opponents could. Tae won. A Morthani who looked more like a scholar than a warrior, held a defensive position for hours against waves of opponents. His species were natural healers, not fighters. But Ji-Wan had taught him that sometimes defending was enough. His opponents grew tired. Taewon's team completed their objective because he refused to let anyone pass his position. 18 hours he stood there. 18 hours of constant vigilance and minor skirmishes. When relief finally came, he collapsed, but he had held. The galaxy watched with growing interest. These cubs fought strangely. They won battles they shouldn't win. Commentators started analyzing their techniques. "Look at how they move," one analyst said during a broadcast. "They never waste energy. Every action has purpose. They're fighting like their human trainer, with patience and persistence. But can that strategy work in the final trials?" Another commentator asked. "Those require quick thinking and overwhelming power." The third challenge was a team event. Capture and hold 3 strategic points against opposition from other teams. Points were awarded for time held, not just capture. Master Thorn's team rushed the first point with overwhelming force, smashing through defenses. They planted their flag and defended against all comers. Everyone expected them to win easily. Jiwan's cubs took a different approach. They identified the point that other teams considered least valuable, hardest to defend, furthest from center. They captured it without resistance and then did something unexpected. They fortified it efficiently and settled in for a long wait. Other teams fought over the two valuable points, expending energy in constant combat. Hours passed. Teams grew exhausted from the fighting. Slowly, cubs from Jiwan's team began moving to assist at other points, fresh and ready while everyone else was tired. By the end of the challenge, they hadn't held the most valuable points the longest, but they had held positions consistently while other teams burned out. They placed second overall, but they looked ready to keep going while first place could barely stand. Respect began to replace mockery. Other students watched Jiwan's cubs with new eyes. These weren't just runners. They were warriors who had learned a different way to fight. In the evenings, the cubs gathered to rest and prepare. Jiwan would sit with them, sharing human stories about persistence. Marathon runners who completed races despite injury, explorers who survived in impossible conditions, soldiers who marched when every muscle screamed to stop. Your species evolved impressive abilities, Jiwan told them. Strength, speed, telepathy. But you evolved in environments where those abilities ensured survival. Humans evolved without special advantages. We survived by being too stubborn to die. That stubbornness became our greatest weapon. Do-yun listened carefully. Is that why human military tactics focus on attrition? Wearing down the enemy? Partly, Jiwan nodded. We learned early that we couldn't always win by being stronger. But we could almost always win by lasting longer. Wars aren't won in single battles. They're won by the side that can keep fighting after the other side quits. As the trials continued, this philosophy proved itself again and again. Jiwan's cubs weren't dominating any single event, but they were consistently placing well, never burning out, always ready for the next challenge. Other trainers began to take notice. Some dismissed it as luck. Others wondered if they had underestimated the human approach to combat. Commander Thalvex watched it all with ancient eyes. He had seen many training methods over his long career. This human method was unusual, certainly, but it produced results that couldn't be denied. The trials were far from over. The final challenge loomed ahead, the one that would truly test everything the cubs had learned. But for now, Jiwan's students had proven something important. They had proven that sometimes the one who looks weakest at the start is the one still standing at the end. They had proven that persistence could match power. They had proven that humans had something to teach the galaxy after all. And they had proven that 20 cubs who learned to think like humans were a force to be respected. Commander Thalvik stood before the remaining teams. Half the original groups had already withdrawn from the trials, unable to continue. Those who remained showed signs of exhaustion, all except one group. Jiwan's cubs stood together, tired but alert. Ready. The final trial begins now, the commander announced. You will be transported to the Crucible, a hostile planet designed to kill you. Your objective is simple. Reach the extraction points before the 72-hour deadline expires. Screens lit up showing the planet's surface. It looked like a nightmare. Toxic swamps, predatory plants, extreme temperature zones, and hostile wildlife. The extraction points were marked in red, scattered across different regions. Other teams will be your competition, Thalvex continued. You may help or hinder each other as you see fit. The environment will test your endurance, your skills, and your will to survive. Many of you will not finish. That is expected. The teams boarded transport ships. As they traveled to the planet, Jiwan gathered the cubs one final time. Everything we've trained for leads to this moment, the human said quietly. The other teams are going to sprint ahead. Let them. Remember, this is 72 hours, not 72 minutes. Pace yourselves. Watch each other's backs. And never ever quit. Wait, what if we fall behind? Minji asked, her forelegs shifting nervously. Jiwan smiled. We won't be behind. We'll be exactly where we need to be. Trust the training. The ships landed at different points. A horn blared, signaling the start. Master Krell's team exploded from their landing zone like a missile, their speed carrying them across the first terrain zone in minutes. Teacher Silith's students used gravity manipulation to fly over obstacles. Master Thorn's warriors simply smashed through anything in their path. Jiwan's cubs started jogging. Just jogging. The same steady pace they had practiced every morning for months. Within the first hour, The fast teams had built massive leads. The observers watching from the academy shook their heads. The humans' students were going to lose badly, but the crucible was not designed for sprinting. The first obstacle was a toxic swamp that extended for kilometers. Master Krell's team tried to speed through it, but the mud was deep and clingy. Running fast just meant sinking faster. Half the team got stuck and had to be pulled out by teammates, wasting precious time and energy. When Jiwan's cubs reached the swamp, they slowed even more. They tested the ground carefully, found the shallow paths, and helped each other across. It took longer, but they arrived on the other side cleaner and less exhausted. The second day began with extreme heat zones. The temperature soared to levels that would cook most species alive. The powerful teams pushed forward aggressively, trying to cross before the heat became unbearable. Many succeeded, but arrived at the other side severely dehydrated and overheated. Jiwan's cubs traveled during the cooler dawn hours, rested in shade during peak heat, and continued in the evening. They lost time on the clock but saved energy, and unlike other teams, they weren't suffering from heat exhaustion. "This is stupid," one commentator said, watching the feeds. "They're falling further behind every hour." "Are they, though?" Another analyst countered. "Look at the condition of the leading teams. They're struggling." Jiwan's cubs looked steady. 30 hours into the trial, disaster struck Jiwan's team. Minji stepped wrong and her leg twisted badly. She collapsed with a cry of pain. The team stopped immediately. They were already far behind the leaders. Stopping now meant almost certain failure. "Go," Minji gasped. "Leave me. You can still make it." Yunwoo knelt beside her, his crystalline armor gleaming. "Jiwan taught us to work as a team. That means all of us or none of us." Taewon examined the leg. As a Morthani, he had natural healing abilities, but a full repair would take hours they didn't have. "I can reduce the swelling and pain, but she can't run on it." "Then we carry her," Minsu said simply. They fashioned a stretcher from local materials, something else Jiwan had taught them. Improvisation, using what's available. They took turns carrying Minji, rotating every hour so no one got too tired. It slowed them significantly, but they kept moving. 48 hours passed. They were in last place now by a huge margin. Then the storm hit. Weather on the crucible could change instantly. This storm brought winds that could tear flesh and rain that burned like acid. The leading team scrambled for shelter, huddling in caves and under rock formations. Some teams that had been pushing too hard were caught in the open and forced to withdraw, their members too injured to continue. Jiwan's cubs had been watching the sky. Sora had noticed the pressure change and the color shifts in the clouds, subtle signs that humans had learned to read on Earth. They had already found shelter before the storm arrived. "How did you know?" Minji asked from her stretcher. "Jiwan taught us to read nature," Sora explained. "Humans didn't have weather satellites when they were evolving. They learned to see the signs in clouds, wind, and animal behavior. They waited out the storm in safety while other teams suffered in inadequate shelter or risked dangerous travel. When the storm cleared after 8 hours, the landscape had changed. Several teams were no longer in the running. Others were scattered and disorganized. The extraction points lay ahead, but everyone was exhausted, except for one team. Jiwan's cubs emerged from their shelter, rested and ready. They had used the storm as a rest period, taking turns sleeping while others kept watch. They had eaten. They had treated minor injuries. They had conserved energy. Minji's leg was better, not healed completely, but she could walk with support now. The team redistributed weight, shared equipment, and started moving again. 60 hours into the trial. 12 hours remained. The extraction point was guarded by the elite Vraxian Guard team, the Academy's special defense force. They had been placed there as the final challenge. Any team that wanted to extract had to get past them. Master Thorn's team arrived first and tried to fight through by force. The guards were fresh and prepared. Thorn's exhausted warriors couldn't break through and had to retreat, wasting precious energy in a failed assault. Other teams tried different approaches. Speed, stealth, gravity manipulation. The guards countered everything. They were professionals and they knew every trick. Jiwan's cubs arrived with 4 hours remaining. They were tired. They had traveled further than any other team, carrying an injured teammate much of the way. By all logic, they should attack immediately before time ran out. Instead, they found a hidden position and waited. "What are they doing?" the commentators asked. They're running out of time. Hyunwoo, Minsu, Dohyun, and the others took turns resting. They watched the guards studying their patterns, their rotation times, their weak points. They had learned from Ji-won that rushing into a bad situation was how you lost. Patience was how you won. The guards had been stationed there for 2 days, ready for constant attacks from desperate teams. They were professionals, but even professionals got tired. More importantly, they got complacent when nothing happened. 3 hours left. Then 2. They've waited too long, a commentator said. Even if they get past the guards now, they won't make the extraction in time. 1 hour remained. That's when Ji-won's cubs moved. The guards had relaxed slightly after hours of no activity. They assumed any remaining teams would come in a desperate rush. Instead, the cubs came in silent and coordinated, using every trick Ji-won had taught them. Dohyun used his telepathy not to attack mines but to project subtle distractions, making guards look the wrong direction at crucial moments. Hyunwoo's crystalline armor, which he had learned to make quieter over months of training, allowed him to position without being heard. Minji, despite her injury, used her speed in short bursts to draw attention while others slipped past. They didn't try to defeat the guards. They tried to get past them, and they succeeded. The extraction zone lay ahead, a cleared area where transport ships waited. Other teams were there already, celebrating their victory. Ji-won's cubs were the last ones running, with 30 minutes remaining. But 30 minutes was enough for cubs who had learned to pace themselves. They reached the zone with time to spare. They had made it. The observers erupted in surprise and applause. Against all odds, the last-place team had completed the trial, not by being the strongest or fastest, but by being smart, patient, and absolutely refusing to quit. As they boarded the extraction ship, Ji-won was there waiting, grinning widely. "Told you to trust the training," the human said. Hyunwoo laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "We did, and you were right." The ship lifted off, carrying them away from the crucible. Through the window, they could see the hostile planet below. Somewhere down there, a few teams were still struggling, still trying to make it. But Ji-won's cubs were done. They had passed the final trial, and they had learned the most important lesson. Sometimes the race isn't won by the fastest runner, but by the one who keeps running when everyone else has stopped. The graduation ceremony filled the grand arena where it had all begun months ago. The 20 cubs who had chosen Ji-won stood together, wearing the silver badges that marked them as academy graduates. They looked different now, leaner, harder, carrying themselves with quiet confidence. Around them stood other successful graduates from different training groups. Some had scored higher on individual challenges, some had more impressive combat records. But everyone in the arena knew that Ji-won's cubs had done something special. They had outlasted the crucible when they should have failed. Commander Thalvik stepped forward to address the assembly. His forearms spread wide, his ancient eyes surveying the crowd. "Today we recognize those who have completed the trials of ascension," he began. "You have proven yourselves worthy. But before you depart to serve your worlds, there is one question that must be answered." He turned to Ji-won, who stood quietly at the edge of the graduates. "Human trainer, many are curious. What is your secret? How did you transform 20 cubs into warriors who succeeded against greater odds?" The arena fell silent. Everyone wanted to know. Ambassadors from dozens of worlds leaned forward in their seats. Military leaders made notes. Even the other trainers watched carefully. Ji-won stepped forward and smiled that familiar, calm smile. "There is no secret," the human said, voice carrying clearly. "Humans aren't special because of what we are. We're special because of what we refuse to accept." Ji-won paused, looking at the assembled crowd. "Every species here evolved advantages. Strength, speed, telepathy, natural weapons. You are all impressive. But you also evolved limits. Your bodies tell you when to stop. Your instincts say this is dangerous, retreat. Your physiology demands rest. Humans evolved the same limits. But we also evolved something else. The ability to look at those limits and say no. The ability to keep going when our bodies scream to stop. The ability to endure." The human gestured to the 20 cubs. "I didn't teach them to be human. I taught them what humans learned long ago. The body will quit before it needs to. Pain is information, not a command. Exhaustion is a suggestion, not a law. The one who understands this has an advantage over everyone who doesn't." Hyunwoo stepped forward. "Ji-won taught us that strength without endurance is useless. I could break walls, but I couldn't fight for more than minutes. Now I understand that real strength is measured in hours, not seconds. Minji spoke next. I was fast, but speed means nothing if you can't sustain it. Humans taught our world about persistence hunting on Earth. They would chase prey not by being faster, but by never stopping. The prey would run until it physically couldn't anymore. That's what we learned. Do-hyun's 3 eyes blinked slowly. I could read minds, but Ji-won taught me that the strongest mind isn't the most powerful one. It's the one that refuses to break. Humans call it mental fortitude. It's terrifying when you really think about it. One by one, the cubs shared what they had learned. Each story was different, but the theme was the same. Humans had taught them to think differently about limits. Sora, the Quellan scientist, had brought her research. I studied human history, she told the crowd. I found examples that seemed impossible. Humans who ran hundreds of kilometers without stopping. Explorers who survived months in conditions that should have killed them. Soldiers who marched for days on minimal food and no sleep. She displayed images and data on the arena screens. At first I thought these were exaggerations. Then I realized they weren't. Humans regularly do things their bodies say are impossible. They've evolved a disconnect between physical limits and mental will. That makes them dangerous, Minsu added. Not because they're strong, but because they don't know when to quit. On the Crucible, we learned this lesson. When we were tired, injured, and behind schedule, we didn't quit because Ji-won taught us that quitting is a choice. Always a choice, Commander Thalvex nodded slowly. And this is what you offer the galaxy, human? The ability to ignore survival instincts? Not ignore them, Ji-won corrected. Understand them. Your instincts evolved to keep you alive in the short term. But wars aren't won in moments. Explorations don't succeed in hours. Building civilizations takes generations. Humans learn to balance short-term survival instincts with long-term persistence. The human looked around the arena. You can have every physical advantage in the universe. But if you quit and your opponent doesn't, you lose. That's the lesson. That's what I taught. The graduation continued with awards and recognitions. Ji-won's cubs didn't receive the highest honors. Those went to students who had dominated specific challenges. But they received something better: respect. After the ceremony, ambassadors and military leaders approached Ji-won with requests. Could the human train their warriors? Could this method be taught to their people? But something else was happening that would have greater impact. Young students from other worlds had watched the trials. They had seen the cubs succeed through persistence and endurance. They wanted to learn. Taewon was approached by 3 young Morthani. You held that position for 18 hours, one said with awe. Our species are healers, not warriors. We thought we couldn't fight. But you showed us differently. Ji-won showed me, Taewon corrected. I just learned to apply it. You can learn too. Similar conversations happened across the academy. The cubs had become examples of what was possible when you combined natural abilities with human persistence. Commander Thalvex watched it all with satisfaction. He had known the humans' methods would be effective. That's why he had invited Ji-won to teach. But even he was surprised by how much impact it had. You've changed how we think about combat training, the commander told Ji-won privately. Many species will now study human history and methods. Good, Ji-won said. Humans aren't better than anyone else. But we learned some lessons the hard way. If sharing those lessons helps others, then that's worth something. As the days passed and graduates prepared to return to their homeworlds, the cubs remained close to their human trainer. They had formed bonds that went beyond teacher and student. On the final evening before departure, they gathered one last time at the training grounds where they had spent so many early mornings running. Will you continue this work? Hyunwoo asked Ji-won. Yes. There's another group of cubs coming soon. They'll need to learn the same lessons you did. Tell them it's worth it, Minji said. Tell them that what seems impossible becomes possible when you refuse to accept limits. Minsu, who had once challenged Ji-won and lost through exhaustion, smiled. Tell them that fighting a human is terrifying not because humans are strong, but because humans simply won't stop. Ever. I'll tell them, Ji-won promised. But they'll need to learn it themselves just like you did. Understanding it intellectually isn't the same as learning it in your bones. The cubs departed the next day, returning to their worlds. But they carried something with them, a new way of thinking about challenges, about endurance, about what was possible. Hyunwoo returned to the Krathian Empire and revolutionized their military training. The focus shifted from pure strength to sustainable strength. His people learned to combine their natural durability with human persistence. Minji brought endurance hunting techniques to her Selkari people, who had always valued speed. They discovered that speed plus stamina was more effective than speed alone. Doyun taught other Nathari telepaths that mental powers meant nothing if you couldn't maintain focus for extended periods. The strongest mind was the one that refused to break under pressure, and in the Galactic Academy, a new group of cubs assembled in the Grand Arena. Commander Thalvex gave them the same choice their predecessors had received: choose any trainer from the galaxy's finest. The cubs looked at the assembled masters, powerful, skilled, impressive. Then they noticed the human standing quietly to one side, hands in pockets, waiting patiently. Word had spread. The stories had been told. These cubs knew what choosing Jiwan meant. Months of running, of pushing past limits, of learning that the body's protests were often lies. They also knew what it offered: the ability to outlast anyone, to succeed when others failed, to carry forward when carrying forward seemed impossible. One by one, as if following a script written by their predecessors, the cubs made their choice. I choose the human. I choose the human. I choose the human. 20 voices, 20 different species. One choice, Jiwan grinned. All right then. Tomorrow morning we start with a run, and in that moment, watching this small human who had revolutionized combat training through the simple principle of never giving up, the galaxy understood something profound. Humanity's greatest export wasn't technology or weapons or even knowledge. It was the terrifying, beautiful idea that limits were meant to be challenged, that exhaustion was temporary, and that the difference between success and failure often came down to one simple question: are you willing to take one more step when everyone else has stopped? The answer, for those who learned from humans, was always yes. One more step. Then another. Then another. Forever, if necessary. Because that's what humans did. And now, 20 more cubs had learned to do the same.